Hi, my name is Josef Gorres. I'm a professor of soil science at the University of Vermont. I'm a member of a research team led by Professor Rebecca Brown at the University of Rhode Island and Shuresh Ghimire, who is an extension professor at the University of Connecticut. With funding by USDA NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant, we developed an app that is to help growers of high tunnel tomatoes manage irrigation and nitrogen. You can find this app at the internet address at the bottom right hand corner of the screen, right here. Many more folks were involved in this research who contributed by designing the research plan and implementing it. Special thanks to the farmers that allowed us to do research in their high tunnels. I would also like to thank the Cornell Climate Smart Farming team for coding this model for us. The goal of this research was to provide high tunnel tomato producers with a simple model to guide them on irrigation and nitrogen management. Currently this work only works for tomatoes, but will hopefully be extended to other crops in the future. The original intent was to support water and nitrogen management decisions by high tunnel growers. But the app also has a version that allows homeowners or commercial growers manage water and nitrogen in their fields or gardens. The two versions differ in that the high tunnel component only uses irrigation water as input, while the homeowner version, of course, recognizes precipitation and irrigation as water sources. In addition, the evapotranspiration component between the two versions is slightly different, with less evapotranspiration occurring in the high tunnel. High tunnel production differs from both greenhouse and field production of vegetables. In high tunnels, production uses native soils, so it's a little bit like working in the field, but they aren't affected by rainfall, so it's a little bit like working in the greenhouse. Because of this, there aren't apps for irrigation and nitrogen management, and our app is to close that gap. The model uses the hydrology developed for the water deficit calculator of the Climate Smart Farming program at Cornell. This is a well-tested model that uses field capacity and the permanent wilting point to route water through the soil. For example, if the soil water exceeds the field capacity, leachate out of the root zone is produced and water and nitrogen are lost from the production system. The model uses a transpiration model that slows plant uptake of water down as the soil dries beyond a certain point. We added a nitrogen component to the model. It is a very simple model of the nitrogen cycle that assumes that when organic nitrogen, so organic matter or amendments or other organic amendments are mineralized, nitrogen immediately becomes nitrate. This is not exactly true, but a good approximation in agricultural soils. The nitrogen inputs are, for this model, organic matter, of course, organic and inorganic nitrogen amendments, and the outputs are plant uptake and nitrogen losses. So while our model is based on research results from others and our own, it's always good to state that it's a model, right? So regardless of how much science goes into the model, it's still a model. A simplified version, basically, of reality. Models give good comparisons between different management practices. They also can give guidance as to what needs to be done next. Because models are not exact, you should still keep observing your crop and look for deficiencies and drought symptoms. So look at this app as a guide to your management, but not the ultimate manager of your crop. Your observations are still very important. The goals for today is to learn the mechanics of how to use the model. There's no use to a model if you don't understand the inputs and the outputs. So what kinds of inputs does the model need, and what kind of outputs does the model provide you with? What are the parameters? So one parameter that's really important is the location. of your high tunnel. It will determine basically the weather. The model will use your location to find the nearest weather station and download current and historical data to make this model work. Also, you want salt texture, organic matter content information, etc. The model also needs planting and termination dates for your crop. It needs amendments, water management inputs, and if you do do a nitrogen salt test, you want to enter those data too. Of course, you want to be able to visualize the data, and the app has two output screens, which you'll see in the next part of the presentation. Let me give you an overview over the screen that you eventually will be working with in this program. You enter the program through the URL that's in the top left-hand corner up there in the search bar of this browser. It's hightunnelsoils.nrcc.cornell.edu. When you open that, you will actually see a map. When you open this for the first time, you will see a map where you can specify the location of your high tunnel, and we'll get to that a little later. But essentially, once you've specified the location, essentially there's really three parts to the screen that you'll see. Everything is on the same screen. So the first part is somewhere where you can enter information about your high tunnel and your management, and maybe salt test results. Right? So, for example, here you see what kind of salt type you have, what your planting and termination dates are. But you can also enter water and nutrient applications, and you can enter any kind of soil tests that you might have for nitrogen. Then another section here is the output section at the bottom of the screen, and you have to scroll down to get there. And so you have two graphs there for outputs. One is the inorganic nitrogen content for the soil through time, and the other one is the volumetric water content through time. One other feature that this has, you can upload your parameter file so that you're not losing information should there be a glitch on your computer. So this goes to the cloud, a safe location on the cloud, and then you can download this information again to start your program again where you stopped using it. So you can create a backup file essentially. When you first open the app, this is what you'll see. You'll see a map that's blank. Unfortunately, I already have a high tunnel on here. It's the red pin over here. But essentially, when you first open the app, you see a map, and this map is about specifying where your high tunnel is going to go. And you can do this in two ways. Either you can enter the address. And I entered 6 Spear Street, South Burlington, Vermont. I'm going to put another one in at 700 Spear Street. South Burlington, Vermont. And I hit return, and it puts it in. And once you put that in, you see the input screen that we already discussed. I can change the location, and I have to show you this because it's kind of important. If you wanted to add something else in there, yeah, you can. So the other way of doing this is to click somewhere on the map. Like maybe I want to put something further down Spear Street, maybe over here. I click on that map, and I have now 1310 Spear Street. Sometimes the map doesn't want to go away when you do this, and in that case you will have to click somewhere on the gray area outside the map, like I do right now. So left click on the gray area and it goes away and comes back to this high tunnel input screen. There's something else that you may want to know about if you have several high tunnels, and I have 3 of them now, right? And you want to get rid of one of these addresses, you can do this by mainly only on the blue pins. So you have the current high tunnel is at 1310 Spear Street and it's a red pin, and other ones are at 700 and at 1408 Spear Street. So I can get rid of the ones that I don't want. So let's say you're going to discontinue your operation at one of them. You can right click on them and it deletes it. You can switch between locations by just clicking on the pin. And that's all you need to know for specifying a location. Now that we have entered the location for our high tunnel, in this case the 1408 Spear Street tunnel, I can do a whole bunch of different things. And I would like to start with specifying some of the very basic parameters that have to do with the soil and the tomato crop that you're growing. And you do this under options. So here's that little window that says options, and you can change the model version from the commercial high tunnel version to the homeowner gardener version. And so the difference again was that commercial high tunnel grower, here the weather file will not include precipitation, and the homeowner gardener file, the model will consider precipitation as well. So theoretically, if you grow tomatoes in the field as well, you could use the homeowner gardener version. But let's start just using the commercial high tunnel grower version of this. Okay, so the other things that we're asking you to do is to enter the soil type, the initial organic matter content for the soil, and then for the plant information, how deep is the root zone of your tomatoes maximally at the end of the growing season, and what is the planting and termination date. So let's check on the soil types. You have 3 different soil types: sandy or coarse textured soils, loamy soils, medium textured, and clay fine textured soils. And I can select them by just clicking on them. The other soil related input would be the initial organic matter content, and you get that from your soil test in the spring. It'll tell you what the percentage organic matter is, and so you can change that either by highlighting the number and adding and then typing the number in, or you can actually change it by using these arrows. So I want to go back to 2% for my sand. Oops, that was a little bit ambitious. The next thing that we do is we change the root zone. So if you think your root zone is 18 inches, then you can leave this as is. But I think mine is 17 inches. There you go. That's basically how deep do the roots go, and how deep does their influence reach, right? So it says here depth that plants have access to soil moisture. Then we have to specify a planting date, and the best way to do this is using this calendar icon. And I want to go back to May 2023 because I wanted to see some of the variations in soil moisture and nitrogen. So we're going to go back to May 1. That's when I put my tomatoes in, and I'm terminating my tomatoes on September 1st, 2023. And now we have specified essentially everything the program needs to know for your crop and for your soil type. Now we're ready to enter some management decisions on water and nutrient applications. And in order to do this, we go to the green button here that says Add Application Event. Click. And now it comes up with a few entries that you can make. So the first entry up here is the date of the event, the amount of, then ask you for the amount of water that you're adding and the amount of inorganic nitrogen that you add. If you are an organic grower, you have a choice of a bunch of different fast, medium, and slow decomposing materials. You know better what to choose for this than I do. And then you can also add, of course, the pounds per acre of nitrogen for this amendment type. All right, let's do this. Oh, there's one other really important thing is you can either add water on a daily basis or you can say, well, every 3 days I'm going to go in there and I'm going to enter how much water I've actually added. Or you can switch to a water scheduler where you can set it up at the beginning of the season. Let's say you were on a 3 or 4 or 5 day schedule of watering in your high tunnel. Then you can switch to that water scheduler and you specify the start date of the schedule and the end date of the schedule, and then the frequency of watering through the season, and of course the amount of water measured in inches. But let's start with the very first type of thing, simple things like application events on a daily basis. So I can just click here and I go back to May 2023. Actually, I'll go back to April. And I'm going to add a little bit of water maybe before I start. And I'm going to add 0.2 inches. I'm going to add maybe 60 pounds of inorganic nitrogen as a starter, and I'll submit that. So now I've created an event on 4/27/2023, and I've added 0.2 inches of water with 60 pounds per acre of nitrogen. If I don't like this, I can either edit this entry with a blue button, and you'll see that, or I can delete it with the red button. And so to this, it goes away, and I have to start again. Okay, so let's do this again. April 27, water 0.2, and inorganic nitrogen 60 pounds per acre in inorganic nitrogen. And I'm going to add something like composted broiler litter, and I'm going to add something like, I think that is a medium decomposing, medium rate in decomposition, and I'm going to add 40 pounds of that. And I have to click on the add amendment in this case to make this work. For the organic amendments, you have to add amendment. You have to click on the add amendment button in order for the program to register it. And then I say submit. So there we go. We have 4/27 added 0.2 inches of water and then we added 40 pounds of organic nitrogen as a medium rate decomposing amendment. It was that composted broiler litter, and we added also 60 pounds of nitrogen. So ideally you want to see some kind of reaction of these graphs on this. So I'm going to click, because the information that, or the dates that I'm on here are for 2024, not for 2023. So it's the most recent dates that it comes up as a default. I want to go and check out 2023, and I do this by just resetting the zoom. You're not zooming in, you're zooming out to all the data that you have. So right here is that, and you see a couple of things right away in these graphs. One, there's this spike in nitrogen. That's when we added that 60 pounds of inorganic nitrogen, and then there is a slow increase of that nitrogen because we added the broiler litter. And then the nitrogen goes down because the plants are picking it up. But more on that in a minute. All right, but we want to add more application events for 2023, and of course, when you do this on for the current growing season, you do this on a daily basis. If you add something, you do this on that very day that you add it. But I wanted to show you something else. I want to show you how to manipulate water through a water scheduler. Right? So if you have set up your irrigation scheduling and you have your watering on a timer, then you can go to this black button at the bottom here, and you click on it, and then it asks you what's the start date. And I'm going to start maybe a little later than maybe in May, let's say May, 10 days after I start my tomatoes. And then the end date will be just before I terminate the tomatoes in September. So I said September 1, I think it was. So I'm going to terminate on the 24th of August. And my frequency of the watering will be every 4 days. And I'm going to add 0.2 inches to start with. Submit. And I have to OK this. Actually, what you can't see is here is this little thing coming up. This action will create 27 new applications. Continue. Of course, we want to continue because we set it up that way. Right? So OK. And now we should have 27 different events between the 10th of May and the 27th of August. And I can go all the way through this. Sorry, the 22nd of August. And that's just setting up the water. Right? So I can change conveniently. If you could change this to also add nitrogen, and I can do this with this edit button. Let's say I wanted to add more nitrogen on 522, and I want to add a faster nitrogen like blood meal, and I'm going to add 20 pounds. Add amendment, and then there it is. So then I submit that, and I should see that change. So I have 20 pounds of blood meal added on 522. If you wanted to also add a test result, you can do this down here. And you give the date, and then the amount of organic matter comes back with the test result and the inorganic nitrogen. So if you do a pre-site dress nitrate test, this is where that information goes. Okay, and that's how you enter information into the program, management information. And the next recording, next part of this recording will be on how to interpret the output. Okay, let's have a look what our management resulted in. So what is going to happen to the inorganic nitrogen content that is synonymous with the available nitrogen that the plants can take up. And let's also have a look at what happened to the water, the soil water content. So this is my management screen, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit further, and here's my output. And let's look at the inorganic nitrogen content first. There's 3 regions in this. So by the way, it's measured in parts per million. And for each day you have a dot on here. The dates are given on the x-axis. For each day there is a dot, and because they've got so many days in this small space on the screen, it looks like a line. The inorganic nitrogen content has 3 regions. The top region, this green region, is everything is fine. The plants have enough nitrogen. You shouldn't have to worry about any side dress at all. Then the next region is relatively narrow. It says here apply 15 pounds per acre twice, 3 to 4 weeks apart. So that's a recommendation. You might actually want to bump this up a little bit. Maybe you want to put 20 pounds down. Maybe you don't want to wait for 3 to 4 weeks to do this. In any case, this is a recommendation that the program gives you when there is some nitrogen stress. When you have more severe nitrogen stress, you get down into this region here, which is the region where your crop needs more nitrogen. So it says here apply 30 pounds per acre twice, 3 to 4 weeks apart. And again, you might want to not wait 3 to 4 weeks depending on how vigorous your crop is growing, and we'll see how that works in a minute. Anyway, each one of these regions goes with a color for the symbol, for the dot symbol here, for the daily symbol. So if you're down in the bottom part of this high deficit region, you will notice that the dots are red. If you are in the okay region, then the dots are green, and in between it's sort of a yellow color. It's just like your traffic light. Green is okay, yellow is caution, and red is you're in a danger zone. So that's the inorganic nitrogen, but you also get information about the volumetric water content, which is down here. It's measured in inches per inch or millimeters per millimeter, or if you multiply this number by times 100, you have percent volumetric water content. Again, there's 3 regions. One is deficit, calculated as no plant stress. So we're in a deficit here because we're below field capacity, which happens for the soil that we've chosen happen to be 20% water. So as soon as we go below the field capacity, we're in a water deficit. But there's no plant stress in this top region at all. Then when we go down to the second part of the screen, you enter a deficit where plant stress is likely, and the colors change from a yellow to an amber. And then finally, when this plant stress is severe, you enter the third region around here, close to the wilting point, and the symbols become red at the end. A couple other things that are to note here is whenever you have a blue and a red dot, you probably have leaching of nitrogen out of the root zone. This may not be very severe sometimes, but it can be. And we create an event where this is more severe than what we see here. Okay, so that's an overview over the output that you can have. Each one of these dots might indicate that you have to take some action. So if you're going down here to the for nitrogen, if you go to this yellow area, so the caution area for the nitrogen, then you have to take some action. You have to look at what date is it. It's 7/15/2023, indicated down here. So this is where this is occurring. So mid-July 2023, there was a deficit according to what we were managing, how we were managing, and so we have to rectify it. And I'll show you that in a second. The deficits that we'll see two kinds of deficits. One is the nitrogen deficit, and I already mentioned this happens sometime in July. We're going into this yellow region, and then sometime a little later in July, around the 20th of July, we end up in this red region where we have a severe nitrogen deficiency. So that's one kind of deficiency that we can deal with, which is the inorganic nitrogen deficiency. But we also have a deficiency when we we eventually get to a water deficiency where there's plant stress. And that happens a little later. Maybe let's see, we can figure this out. You hover over the dots, and the little screen at the bottom will tell you what the date is and what some of the other things are in there. So at the end of July, we're entering this amber region of the water deficit, which means the plant stress is likely. And a little later, towards August, mid-August, the plant stress becomes severe. So we have to intervene in two ways. We have to increase our watering regime towards middle of July. And we also have to add more nitrogen in the middle of July in order to keep the nitrogen in that green region at the top. So let's scroll back to our management, and let's find so the middle of July. And I'm not going to apply right when the deficit occurs. I want to apply a little earlier. So I'm going to apply additional nitrogen on the 5th of July, and I do this by clicking. So this is on my watering schedule. So I'm clicking on the edit button. This is the blue button with the pencil, and thank you. This gives you an idea of how to calculate certain things, calculate the amount of nitrogen. So let's figure out. I'm going to add something like another 30 pounds of nitrogen at this very fast growth stage of the tomatoes, and I submit that, and let's see what happens to this graph. Right, so now we see that spike of 30 pounds of nitrogen, bringing up the total inorganic nitrogen to 97 pounds per acre, or 48 parts per million. But we still get into a problem area a little later this time, 7/23. The plants are really sucking up that nitrogen. So 7/25, 7/23, we're going back into that yellow area. So I'm going to add a little bit more nitrogen on 7/21, and so the blue button, and I'm going to add another 30 pounds on that day. Submit, and so now we've delayed the onset of nitrogen deficiency until beginning of August. So I'm going to add a little bit more at the beginning of August, right here, 802. I'm going to add more nitrogen and another 30 pounds to tide me over to the end of the growing season, I hope. And yeah, we're still entering towards the end. We're still entering that zone where there's some likely deficiencies in nitrogen. but we're not really getting into the red at all until we harvest the tomato. So I think you're probably going to be okay leaving it alone right now. The thing that worries me more now is the amber region in the water deficit graph. So it's this region here, and you notice that on the 31st of July we're entering a water deficit that is stressing the plants. So I want to start changing some of my my water management towards the end of July. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. So on 7/29 I'm going to add something like 0.4 inches of water. And I'll submit that and see what happens. So 7/28 is still a problem. It's delayed a little bit. Here's that spike of that 0.4. You can see a very steep incline here. I'm going to add some more water apparently. So I'm going to add more water on 7/17. And once again, you see a little bit of a spike on 7/20. That's right here. 7/17. With that spike, we have delayed the water deficiency until 8/11. So I'm going to add a little bit more water, maybe beginning of August. 8/02. I'm going to add another additional 0.4. Oops, not 40 inches. 0.4 inches. Submit. And now almost to the very end of the growing season, we have saved our crop from water deficit. But I want to be careful, and I'm going to add something on the 14th. And here we go. So now we have a little bit of water deficit towards the end of the season, within a few days of the termination of the plants. I just wanted to create a leaching event that actually takes some of the nitrogen out of your soil. And in order for us to be able to see that, the little pop-up screen that occurs when I hover over a data point on the graphs, so it occurs at the bottom here. That gives you a lot of information, and it also gives you information about how much nitrogen is leached on that day. So we're going to use that feature to find out, how much nitrogen is leached on a particular date. So I'm going to create a leaching event at the early growing season, and I do this by changing the amount of water that I'm adding. So at the beginning of the beginning of the growing season, the water content is still pretty high. It's close to field capacity, and it should be pretty easy for me to create this problem, right? So I'm going to add 1 inch of water to the sand. I'm going to submit that, and I'm going to go back. So in order to see what happened, go back to the graph, and here is that problem, 5/13. So I added that on 5/14. I added 1 inch, and so around that period of time, I should see a decrease in nitrogen, right? So I brought the water content above field capacity by quite a bit, and I can see where that occurs. If you go above field capacity, the program sets it back to field capacity the next day. So you can't really see this by a spike above field capacity in the water content. What you see is an additional blue and a blue dot with a pink halo around it, and that indicates a percolation event where water moves below the root zone. But in the inorganic nitrogen graph, you can actually see it. You can see a drop in the inorganic nitrogen content right here. So you have an increase. So here's an increase. So you're going from a red zone to the green zone because we added some nitrogen there, 60 pounds of inorganic nitrogen. That's that really fast rise. And then we added some broiler litter close to the time when we start the crop, and it's composted broiler litter. So it's this little increase that you see here, and then I added 1 inch of water around the middle of May, and now we see this drop in nitrogen, and that's due to the fact that nitrogen is being leached out of the root zone. And we can look this up on that little screen at the bottom, and I can't point to exactly where you see it because it basically makes this thing go away. Let me try. All right, so I have a leaching event right there, leached N. Where I'm right now for demonstration purposes, there's nothing leached. But if I go back here to the middle of May, where I've added 1 inch of water when I was already close to field capacity, I can see the leaching. So I go down there where it says leached N in that pop-up box, and it says I leached 16 pounds of nitrogen per acre, which is then missing later on. So essentially we're getting into deficits much faster than before because we lost those 16 pounds. So that's what happens. This is how you can detect a leaching event. It's inorganic nitrogen drops quickly. A couple of peculiarities about this graph. You notice that the graph indicates that it's a pretty constant moisture content at the beginning of the season and then at the end of the season as well. Essentially, what happens at the beginning of the year, on the 1st of January, the program basically assumes that your high tunnel has reached field capacity through water inputs, wherever that might be coming from. So at the beginning of the growing season, you always start with a volumetric moisture content that's equal to field capacity. Then at the end of the season, so after that red termination line, we've gone into deficit, and that deficit stays the same because the plants have been terminated. There's no more water uptake. And then on the 1st of January, right here, the water content goes back up to field capacity. So that's peculiar about this program. It doesn't recognize any kind of evapotranspiration during times when there's no plants. There are likely to be plants in your high tunnel, like weeds, or if you add a second winter crop maybe, then you will definitely see a change in that moisture in your high tunnel, but not in this program. And so the next step for us is to find funding to allow a second crop to be planted in the high tunnel, so that we don't have to really think about field capacity being the starting point. And also, of course, we would also drive down the nitrogen again here if we have a second crop, a winter crop in the high tunnel, and that's also really important because in the end, your nutrient management will also depend on what what the nitrogen content is at the beginning of the season, and that is influenced by how much decomposition you have of organic matter. With that, I think this is all you really need to know to run this program, and I'm sure that you can be very creative with this. As you know, as a software person, I've seen people being super creative with programs that I've written, and I'm sure that you can do the same thing here. Thank you for listening, and maybe we'll see you again when we have added more components to this program. Thank you very much.